Wonderful. Welcome, everyone. I'm so glad to have you here this morning, this afternoon, this evening, wherever you're joining us from. My name is Jen Seiler. I'm the Vice President of Global Community Engagement at the Save and Vaccine Institute. And you are joining here with us today for part of our COVID-19 listening and learning series. And the title of today's event is pretty exciting. And we know we've heard from lots of you wanting to receive more information on this topic. So excited to be able to bring you this conversation today. COVID-19 vaccine demand planning and product choices, tools and learnings for immunization professionals. So we've got a pretty fantastic panel for you. I know just 1 hour of time together, so we'll have presentations from several of the folks on the line, but then really want to dig into the conversation. So really would love to hear questions and thoughts from you as we go throughout the session. Next slide, MJ, please. Just quick instructions, if you can please mute yourself when you're not speaking, just to limit the background noise. Welcome to use reactions and raise your hand if you'd like to speak. We welcome, once we start opening up for questions, we'd love to have your live voice share those questions. And also please do engage in the chat box. It would be great if everyone who's joining us can quickly introduce themselves in the chat now, just your name and role and where you're joining us from. Next slide. And this is just a little bit more information on our listening and learning, kind of our broader initiative. You can, and we'll circle back to this at the end as well, but we have a podcast series as well as these live events, one of which we're hosting today. So you can join us. We'll put the link also in the chat for you to check out all the content that we have developed previous to today. And then certainly after this, we'll share out, you can find the content from today on our website. Again, the listening and learning series, just to highlight, is really focused on sharing out insights and learnings from the COVID-19 vaccine rollout. So over the course of the last year, we've really focused on how can we highlight different lessons learned, different tools, and different things that can help the community drive vaccine uptake. And so again, excited for today's session. Next slide, MJ. Great. I'm going to kick it over to Mark to take us through, as our moderator, to take us through the session today.
Thank you, Jen, and welcome to everyone who is in the audience. A special shout out to the Boost community. I see a lot of them today, and it's always refreshing to see familiar names and hopefully faces at some point. We have a great panel for you today for this conversation around the listening and learning podcast that Boost hosts. For those who don't know me, my name is Mwabizita Ndlovu, and I'm calling in today from Kampala in Uganda. And in a minute, I'll ask our panelists to introduce themselves, starting with Dr. Immaculate Ampeire, who is Deputy Manager, Uganda National Expanded Program on Immunization. Dr. Immaculate, would you like to come off mute and introduce yourself?
Yes, indeed. It's good afternoon here. Good morning. Good evening, members. Thank you we are excited to be part of this learning platform. And my name is Dr. Ampeire Immaculate, and I work with the Ministry of Health in the EPI program since 2014. And our main duty is really mainly planning, capacity building, and monitoring performance for routine immunization and outbreak response and supplemental immunization activities. We are glad to be here, and thank you.
Thank you, Doc. And Dr. Immaculate is not alone in Uganda. She's with her colleague, Jimmy Ameni. Jimmy, please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Love. Jimmy Ameni is my name, and I support the EPI program as a supply chain specialist. I've been working with the program for the last 4 years, and I play a key coordination role in coordinating the entire immunization supply chain in the country with all the different partners that support us. And really, it's a pleasure for me to be on this call.
Wonderful. Thank you, Seville. Next is Benjamin Shiabi. Did I say it right, Benjamin? Please introduce yourself.
Yeah, Benjamin Schreiber, no problem. You said it good. And then, so I work for the delivery partnership, which is led by Ted Scheiban, who is a global, who's been nominated as a global lead coordinator for COVID vaccine 19 delivery, and in the structure underneath him, which is we call the COVID vaccine delivery partnership. I'm a deputy responsible for demand planning. That's what we talk about today here, as well as financing. The focus, what we do is really provide concerted support to 34 countries, 34 countries that had below 10% coverage in mid-January when we established the partnership. But we do some work also across all AMC countries. One of them is this demand planning, and I will, yeah, like I said, I will talk more about it in a moment.
Wonderful. Thank you, Benjamin. And last but not least, Dr. Alba Village. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Alba Village. I'm a medical epidemiologist, and also I have a PhD on maternal immunization, and I work as part of the EPI team at WHO headquarters. And I work in different topics, strengthening routine immunization, but also in terms of how to scale up COVID vaccination from technical perspective. I'm really glad to be here with all of you today.
Wonderful. So let's jump straight into the panel discussion. Ben, let me start with you. COVAX demand planning process. How has that been playing out from your perspective? I know you have a few slides to share with us or to talk to us about. Please go ahead. Yep.
Yeah, I will talk about it. I thought slides, we often use slides, but then I think it's sometimes a story is better understood not using slides. So
indeed,
the story is really that when COVAX started, there was no demand planning. You know, there was a problem because it was a complete undersupply. Demand was endless for the few vaccines that existed. So you didn't have to do much demand planning. Because every dose that was received at the global level, we tried COVAX tried to push to the countries as quickly as possible. But of course, not enough. That what resulted in this huge inequity that we've seen, that resulted also in the EPI teams in the countries not having visibility of what kind of product was coming and how many were coming. And then we had the procurement behavior of the high income countries that kind of consumed all the products that they could get hold of, and export bans. So it was just a pretty bad situation last year. There was really no demand forecasting and planning, or even if you would have put it into place, you couldn't have satisfied it. And that was pretty much the situation until Q4 last year, end of last year, when what happened then is three things. You had, number one, some of the high income countries saturated their consumption. So they started to release their doses through donations. Then you had new producers coming into the market with new products that were then qualified, and you had new manufacturing sites being open, and the whole export bans were kind of lifted. So you had these things coming together, and suddenly the whole situation moved from extreme undersupply towards a moment in balance to a situation where now we probably, if you look at the production overall in this year, we have many more doses being produced globally on COVID vaccines than probably the world needs. So now we are in a situation, though, and COVAX in a situation that they have secured enough doses, they have much better visibility of how many doses are coming in, that COVAX was able to shift its policy for allocating doses from having been supply constrained to now being demand driven. But then honestly, as the situation changed, nobody had a real good clue of which products are needed at the country level, how many products, and who wants what product. So that's where we then kind of came in play and established the first demand forecasting process that was launched in January, to kind of get an idea really of understanding which products do countries want, when do they want them, and then in which quantities. And that was the first time actually we started to get a view across the AMC 92 countries about this. And as we launch a new process, we expected actually a little bit lower response, but we had a really good response. 83 countries responded. And I really want to appreciate everybody who has participated here in this call on this work, because a lot of work, because it was the first time you did it, and you had to do it still with a lot of uncertainty. Probably in January, not all countries knew exactly how many doses they need, because we're experimenting with different vaccination strategies. So I think it was a tough exercise to have done in January. I think over time, I always say, I assume that the process is getting better and you can rectify it, because we're repeating this demand forecasting process on a regular basis, so it allows the countries to rectify maybe if they are over forecasted or under forecasted something. So there's flexibility built into the system. But I always said, I expect countries also to get the forecast wrong, because forecasts are always wrong. You never know exactly how many doses you need, given also the country context, etc. So I think just want to give this message. Yes, it was a new process. It was difficult, but I'm actually very happy of the quality and the work that countries did. And it's the first time that then COVAX used this data to now make allocations. So the process is countries submit their forecast, we aggregate it, do a little bit of a review, sense check. It goes to the joint allocation team. The joint allocation team then looks of, these are the supplies I have, this is the demand I have, how do they match? This is published now. There's a report out you can download on the WHO website. And then the countries receive their allocation letters. So round 15 was done this way, and round 16 is already in the process. So I hope those who work at the country level that you will be able to submit your demand forecast by end of this week. Even if you don't want anything, that's fine. Just say, I don't want anything. I put 0 in. But it would be good to just get some info. Apart from looking at the request for doses for countries, we also included a question on what are the targets that countries want to reach. And that is important information, because COVAX needs to kind of understand how many doses need to be secured from now until the end of next year, or even, first of all, end of this year, then even into next year, overall to make sure that there's enough doses to support the countries to achieve their national vaccination targets. And these vaccination targets may differ from global targets, and that's fine, because it needs to be a country level decision and discussion about what's your target population and what coverage you want to achieve. But just knowing this is kind of better than just assuming every country will achieve 70%, which not every country will achieve, at least not in the immediate short-term future. So that's it. I'm stopping here and happy to discuss more and answer your questions. Over.
Thank you, Benjamin. Planning during a time of uncertainty, I don't envy your position at all. I want to move to Dr. Alba now. Please talk to us about product choice. We've heard Benjamin talk about who wants what products and how much, but this speaks to product choice. What can you tell us from your work, that what you've seen?
Thank you. So I think we have to understand that we are in an evolving situation and evolving in terms of the new variants. We have Omicron right now. We don't know yet what is going to happen in the future. Also in terms of the vaccine products that are available right now, we have 8 products, vaccine products that they have safe recommendations. And in total, in terms of EUL, it's 10 products. So it means that countries have an option or different options in terms of how to proceed with their programs. And then the third piece that I want to mention is that all of this is affecting also the recommendations in terms of policy recommendations for the immunization program, in terms of what to use for primary series, what to use for boosters, for which groups, among other factors. So in that context, we wanted to be able just to pull together all the different recommendations from WHO SAGE recommendations, as well as other considerations that countries can consider when they're making the decisions about which COVID vaccine products they would like to include in the demand planning. So Benjamin really clearly explained the process to request them, but before that, there needs to be a decision in terms of planning what the country would like to achieve in terms of targets and which vaccines maybe are going to be part of that. So having said that, next slide, please. We created a slide deck. It's a slide set that basically is called Considerations for Choosing COVID Vaccine Products, that has a clear content, that it's the summary of the latest WHO recommendations, as well as for any vaccine effectiveness information or considerations, specific characteristics of every single product, with the idea that it includes all the UL products, most of them which are also included as part of the COVAX portfolio. The objective is to help to orient the Ministry of Health as well as the NITAGs in their COVID vaccine product choices. Next, please. The content it's on a slide set that could be used as a document or could be used as a presentation, but the idea is it has only 3 main chapters. The first one is the why it's important to optimize the COVID vaccine portfolio. And there are mainly, we can say, 4 main reasons. The first one is that we said it already, that probably the countries, there are several products, so it's hard to imagine that we'll be able to access only or to achieve high vaccination coverage with only one single product. And also we have to consider that these products have different characteristics. The second one is the need to optimize the program achieve covered targets. The countries need to consider different factors, as well as not only which vaccine products, also how many doses of each product are going to be needed, depending on the type of population they want to target, for example. The third one, Benjamin has already spoken about it, and it's about the COVAX allocation. It's now demand-driven. And finally, the need for, to be able to success, we need intentional planning in terms of the COVAX portfolio, COVID vaccine portfolio. So these are the main 4 reasons. Next, please. And then to be able to make the decisions, what we created, it's on a slide deck, and I'm not intending for you to read. I'm going to provide the link where all these slides are available. So this is only just to show what it's there. The first slide, it's a summary, and you can see different colors because it provides a summary of the different COVID vaccine products with the link to the SAGE recommendations, as well as it specifies if they are part of the COVAX vaccine, the COVAX portfolio. The second piece, which you can see like a circle, it uses the micro-planning guidance from WHO, which has 8 steps and considers for every single of the steps, which are the considerations about when thinking which vaccine products you would like to consider. And finally, the third piece, which is the slide at the bottom, it's about what about mix and match schedules, what we call the heterologous schedules. WHO has already recommended that either for primary series, so it means for first and second dose, you could use different vaccines, and also for a booster dose. And that's based on the safety information, which it doesn't show that there is an increase of local reactions or any safety concerns. And the other important piece is in terms of effectiveness. There is data that it shows that mixing vaccines in a specific order, as you can see in the slide, not here, but you will be able to see it, that increases effectiveness. So the protection against disease. Next, please. And then the final piece, it's an annex with all summary of different type of information that could be helpful for the NITAG, or the idea that this is the idea. The first thing, it's a glossary of definitions. We're using different terms. We're talking about heterologous schedules. We're talking about parameter series, additional doses. What do we mean by that? Also, there is a piece about vaccine effectiveness. What do we know about the protection against Omicron in terms of infection, severe disease, by vaccines, what's available, the evidence, summarizing the evidence available to date. Then there are tables that are really in a simplified way. They summarize the recommendations and also storage conditions and so on. And finally, specific recommendations for groups like pregnant women, immunocompromised children and adolescents, and so on. Finally, next slide, it's my last one, where you can find it. So this is publicly available, and it's already available in 3 languages, in English, French, and Spanish. This is the first version that we created with information up to date until mid-end March. And we are aiming to to continue periodically updating it and to also disseminating new versions. So any feedback or any request that you think about information that could be helpful to you, we're really open to include it for the next iterations. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Alba. And I think the invitation is clear there. We'll make the slides available so to our audience, don't fret. We'll share this information with you so you can look at the sites and the information that has just been shared. I want to move now to Dr. Immaculate. The Uganda experience with portfolio planning, what has that been like?
Thank you so much. And it's a privilege to share the lessons learned. Basically, for COVID-19 rollout for Uganda has been a learning experience. Our initial response as a country was to develop a national vaccine deployment plan as for all outbreaks and campaigns. That was what we did. And we used that document to guide the country in terms of engaging with the COVAX facility and also other bilateral engagements to get the vaccine and commit government also to provide resources for the COVID-19 response. Choice of the vaccine at the time mainly depended on the National Regulatory Authority, approvals and registration with the companies, and also WHO approval. That was the primary determinant of the choice of the vaccine at the time. And also later on is when the NITAG was engaged, and they later gave us also their recommendations. But basically, it was availability of vaccines really to save the situation, and getting limited doses through bilateral donation from government. Our first 100,000 doses of AstraZeneca were from the government of India, and then also about 900,000 from the COVAX facility. So there was no choice at that time in terms of quantity and also availability. Another step was really the compatibility with the cold chain. We tended to choose at the beginning vaccines that could fit in our existing cold chain equipment at the national level and subnational level. And we found it also easy for vaccines that were similar in terms of administration with existing vaccines in routine immunization. So that's what made it easy in terms of choosing which vaccines. And at the time, the COVAX facility also gave us a small platform of preference of vaccines via the COVAX facility platform. So that's what we did. It's so recent that the cold chain team now has a tool to conduct a systematic planning and forecasting of vaccines. And we are hoping that it will really be dependent on consumption, because we see a reduced uptake of vaccines with reduced burden of disease in the communities. So we are struggling in terms of rolling out vaccines. We are registering expiries. And so I hope this tool can really be tailored to the consumption and also the operational challenges in rolling out the vaccine at the operational level. We had the vaccine even with the donation, but there was no operational support to roll it out to the communities. There's also a need to align this the tool to emerging guidance of vaccination beyond the reactive phase, because it was more of reactive, high-risk groups. Beyond that, what next? in terms of WHO guidance? Is it follow-up campaigns, the frequency, and also choice of the vaccines beyond the emergency use listing stage is also critical. So my colleague Jimmy Amen does most of the work. He did most of the engagements with a senior country manager for Gavi for clearance of all the consignments. And I think he will give more depth to this discussion. Thank you, and over to you, Jimmy.
Thanks, Dr. Immaculate, for that very elaborate, preamble that gives context to quite a number of aspects that were considered, and really, again, picking up from, I think it was Benjamin earlier who mentioned the fact that it's best to actually share this context from a storytelling perspective, with the understanding that we've all gone through this phase. Dr. Immaculate alluded to the fact that initially, really, it was an issue of vaccine scarcity and, being able to only access vaccines that are available. And then we moved to the next phase, where different countries were actually now beginning to share quite a number of doses that were available to them. And in there also came unique challenges that we had to look out for in terms of specific vaccine types, but also the shelf life against the specific uptakes that we against the specific country vaccine uptake rates that we had as another variable that we were considering in which vaccine would be able to come in the country. And then there was also preference that was geared towards the fact that we had initially people who had been vaccinated with a specific type of vaccine. I think largely in the case of Uganda, we had deployed AstraZeneca at the beginning, and until the time when we were actually guided that there was an opportunity where we were able to, start discussing options of being able to mix and match. Initially, our demand forecast and all that were geared towards being able to get vaccines that would enable us get second dose vaccines for those who had got the first dose. And also the other driver was in the very first round when single dose vaccines came on board, I think with the whole understanding on whether we were able to align and improve people being able to access vaccines, there was a relative preference to a single dose vaccine, I think at the time, with the understanding that so many people just wanted to get through with the entire response, get one jab, and you qualify to be vaccinated. And so in terms of our preference at the time, there was also a bit of a push towards that area. Dr. Immaculate alluded to the fact that cold chain capacities were also a major indicator in terms of which specific type of vaccines we would get, with the understanding that initially our international cold chain system was largely running a 2 to 8 degree range, temperature range. So it was a bit easier even in transportation for us to be able to deploy vaccines within that temperature range. And with the specific vaccine characteristics of the mRNA vaccines coming in, Pfizer requiring ultra cold chain storage capacities, those were initially vaccines we didn't actually push for, notwithstanding the fact that Uganda already had some relative capacity, with the understanding that previously we had actually rolled out an Ebola response on the border districts with the DRC and all that, but it was not adequate. So we initially did not actually take this option until when we had to actually acquire additional equipment for us to be able to store a sizable number of doses in the country, is when we were actually now able to welcome all those different types of vaccines. And but they still actually pose a challenge with the understanding that you might actually have this capacity at the central warehouse, and the only option you have is to actually thaw the vaccines when they leave the central warehouse, when you send them to the different districts across the country. And then progressively, again, following guidance on the mix and match and the introduction of the need for boosters and all that, again, meant that there was now an opportunity for us to be able to increase on our wide range of vaccine requirements and all that, and making it a bit easier for us to be able to, again, with guidance from WHO and all that, be able to actually communicate to the population specific different types of vaccines that could be mixed and matched against the requirements that we would have. Notwithstanding, it also opened up a door to the understanding that if one vaccine was not available and the guidance was clear that the available one can actually be mixed with the other, is actually a room that we were able to have to be able to ensure that the vaccination response continues in the country. And then progressively, as we were moving from the specific risk targeted populations, and also beginning to now vaccinate the other age categories, came the need of vaccine specific target age groups. And really this also pushes the specific type of vaccine that that we need to be able to deploy in the different age categories. And again, this also links to the fact that again, with WHO guidance and all that, there are certain specific vaccines that are approved for deployment in certain age groups, and there are those that are not. So all these are variables that we are considering in making our demand forecast. And Annette, Dr. Immaculate also alluded to the fact that the specific regulatory framework in the country that, I mean, enables us to be able to bring in whatever vaccines we are bringing, meant that in this particular case, only EUA listed vaccines would come in the country. That partly also affected which vaccines would come into the country and which ones wouldn't. Case in point, Uganda has never had to bring in Sputnik, but some countries have. And but again, because initially it's not EUA listed, so these vaccines couldn't come in, and we still see the same thing happening. I think there was an offer for a donation for the COVID vaccine. Still, we are not able to bring it in because it's not listed. And so I think in hindsight, the real general message is that there are different variables and it's been a moving shift. And with all this in context, actually informs the specific different vaccine requirements. And again, at the moment, our current uptake rates and are also informing the quantities that we are forecasting that we can be able to consume in the next coming months. Thank you.
Thanks, Jimmy. Very insightful. And looking at what the determinant factors were with your vaccine requests and choices. I want to bring in Dr. Benjamin into the conversation again and ask how countries can integrate the demand planning process into discussions about coverage targets and planned vaccination strategies. Your thoughts?
I think, I mean, what Jimmy just said was really insightful, and then really appreciate it, and the team, the work that you're doing. And then Alba also outlined that this is part of the planning. So I think countries are now at a better stage. Well, it depends, better or worse stage, depends on which stage they're in. But generally, countries now have a better view of how they want and can reach their populations, because they have gone now through 3-4 months of having, I would say, a bit more steady supply. The problem last year, there was no supply, right? So now, at least since December, there have been significant amounts of doses being shipped to countries, and countries are really experimenting different strategies, from mass vaccination sites to outreach to campaigns, geographic campaigns. Now some countries are starting to bundle some of these campaigns with integrating it with measles and deworming in some countries. So it just I think there's many approaches, and I think countries are in a better state now to know how they want to, at least for the next 3 to 4 or 5 months, how to move forward. We do see a lot of countries pursuing campaigns. That is probably it's not inexpensive. So it's an expensive approach to get doses out, but it's also extremely efficacious. It's very impactful and gets doses and coverage up quickly. I mean, so we do see that. And I do think that in many countries, this will continue until for the next 3, 4, 5 months, until the end of the year, and some maybe. But at some stage, the vaccination strategy needs to think about integrating into the primary healthcare and EPI system. And I think that is going to be very country-specific discussion of how this will be integrated. Because going forward, the SAGE roadmap is quite clear. You want to target your high risk and highest risk populations, and you kind of move potentially a little bit away of just getting coverage, large population coverage up, and you need to become more precise in your targeting and making vaccines available through routine fixed sites, etc. So I think the discussion we've had with countries beginning of last year is completely different than discussions we had in November. It's completely different that we had in now at country level. And like what Jimmy just described, I mean, there's so much learning going on, and we haven't yet reached the stable state. So I think there's still going to be a lot of learning, and therefore let's be flexible, let's be supportive, and leverage what we have. I think that's the objective of the partnership, really providing the support to countries so that they reach their targets that they set themselves. So they need to set their own targets so that they know what to work against.
Excellent. Just to kind of wrap up this section, we'll be asking the audience to field their questions in a moment. I just want to close this section by asking Dr. Alba, demand planning data shows that countries tend to request familiar vaccines, right, with less demand for new products. Can you talk to us about the considerations and trade-offs between adding new products to country portfolios versus maintaining the current selection?
Sure. So I would say there are 3 main things. The first one is, what are your national targets? So what are you trying to achieve and who are you trying to vaccinate? The second one is to plan for the requirements. What are going to be the characteristics of the different vaccines, either the ones that you have used or potential new ones? And the third one, it's in terms of service delivery. How are you planning to deliver them? And I think Benjamin already mentioned that there are different ways, some doing through routine, other campaigns, and so on. So considering these 3 main things, all vaccines that have EOL have shown that they are safe, as well as that they have shown efficacy and also effectiveness against Omicron. So it means that all vaccines that have EOL are also the vaccines that are part of the COVAX portfolio. So we're talking about vaccines that are good vaccines and they continue to be effective against severe disease for Omicron. It means hospitalization as well as death. So having considered that and coming back to the 3 main points that I said, when you consider introducing new vaccines, the first one, when you define targets, you have to, based on the SAGE prioritization roadmap, the updated version from January, make super clear that you are going to have more impact in terms of your populations if you focus on vaccinating first with primary series and boosters, the high-risk groups. When I say high-risk groups, I mean healthcare workers, elderly, immunocompromised, pregnant women. So you have to consider that the vaccines that are available, they're all can be administered for 18 years of age, and some of them can be administered before that. But I mean, what I'm saying, high-risk groups, all of them can be used for that purpose. The second piece in terms of requirements, and this is also what where I would like to link also what our colleagues from Uganda have expressed. There are some storage requirements, there is shelf life that should be considered. It's not the same what you're going to be able just to do potentially in an urban area that it's near by the central warehouse where potentially you can have ultra cold chain capacity that would you need in more in a rural area. You have also to need to consider what will happen in terms of different populations. For immunocompromised, we know that we'll need for any vaccine an additional dose as part of primary series. And in case of using inactivated vaccines, there will be a need for even an additional one for those that are 60 years of age or older. So it means that there are differences between the different products, and these should be considered when the country is making their decisions. And also, I made reference earlier about the mix and match, which are the combinations that have been recommended by WHO. So basically, in a nutshell, it means that except inactivated vaccines, every single type of vaccine, every single vaccine product could be used as a primary series to complete it. So it means second dose, or as a booster. So you can administrate AstraZeneca and then Pfizer and then AstraZeneca. You can do these types of combinations. And this is something that should be considered also when the country is planning. Finally, in terms of service delivery, there is a point about acceptance. What has been happening in terms of the demand in the country? Are some products that maybe has raised concerns or rumors, or there is misinformation? That's something that should be considered also in terms of what you're aiming to scale up your vaccination coverage. And the new products, some of them are using platforms that have been used for other previous vaccines. And when I mean previous vaccines, I mean more traditional ones like HPV, pertussis, hepatitis B. So we have different types of platforms, and this could be mix and match with the idea to be able to address some of the concerns that the population might have. And finally, there is a piece. When you're introducing a new vaccine, you have to be able to monitor it. So you have to be able to include that vaccine as part of your system to be able to understand what has been happening in terms of coverage, but also in terms of monitoring potential adverse events. It's important to know which populations have received which type of vaccine product in order to be able to monitor what's happening in real life. So these are some of the considerations summarizing these three main buckets that I think are really important when you're considering introducing a new product. And for the future, we know that there are several products that are in the pipeline. So we'll probably have additional products that are going to have UL, and potentially they could be part of the COVAX portfolio. So it's important to be open-minded, and also who knows what's going to happen with the variants. Maybe we'll need different type of vaccines. So this is going to be an evolving context, and we have to be open to that.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Alba. I want to open the line now to our audience to ask questions of our panelists. There's already a question from Karen Page. Karen, if you're okay with unmuting and asking your question, are you comfortable with doing that? Okay, I've seen a message from Karen. I'll ask your question on your behalf. Karen asks, I've heard that INGOs can access vaccines through COVAX Humanitarian Buffer, but in practice have largely been unable to receive them due to manufacturers' indemnity issues. Is anything being done to alleviate this so INGOs can be more active in this area? Benjamin?
Yeah, that has been a legal debate by legal people and lawyers, you know, and honestly, they messed it all up, in my view. But now I think the key issues about the indemnification liability have been solved as far as I understood. So some of the major bottlenecks have been resolved. So INGOs can apply to the humanitarian buffer. But also note that I think a lot of humanitarian populations can be reached, those that are already in country. So the humanitarian buffer is really it's a last resort, and you apply to it if you have humanitarian populations and the host government is not supporting the vaccination of these humanitarian populations. So I think here Dr. Immaculate can say that I think in Uganda, as an example, they have a lot of humanitarian populations, but they're actually doing a great job in also securing vaccines for these populations, and you know, so the government actually has included the humanitarian populations in their vaccination plan and is providing these vaccines. So it is a buffer of last resort, can be applied for, but if you have any concerns on specific countries, there may be enough vaccines already at the country level that can be provided. But if not, it is now become easier and more clear of how to apply. But it is overall has been a bit of a lengthy process. I agree. Over.
Thanks, Benjamin. Dr. Immaculate, talking about your processes in country, there's a question here about bottlenecks. How can demand planning help countries to identify delivery bottlenecks, funding bottlenecks, and how can countries mobilize resources and a response to address these bottlenecks? Sorry, we can hardly hear you, Dr. Immaculate.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so as Dr. Alba said, I think the bottom line of strong delivery systems for vaccines for routine and also the COVID-19 is basically data. The data management systems for countries in terms of at receipt at the central store and being able to capture doses administered, wastage, and districts being able to track the vaccines up to the user point is the bottom line for that should actually feed into the forecast and tell us at national level the target audience, how much money do we need, and being able to engage our partners in the country and to synergize and integrate on the existing health delivery mechanisms to deliver the vaccine, because we cannot sustain the campaign mode. So strengthening the data capture system into the forecast, monitoring it for action, I think is the way to go for countries to be able to really make informed decisions with the partners and top management. Thank you.
Okay. And this question I'll direct to both Benjamin and Dr. Alba. How should countries prioritize boosters, third doses, and adolescents into their demand planning efforts? I'll start with Dr. Benjamin.
No, I think Alba is probably better placed.
Sure, happy to provide a response because in January 2022, SAGE provided an updated version of the prioritization roadmap. And what the modeling is showing clearly is that if countries really want to have impact, the first ones that they should receive the boosters should be the high priority groups. So what it's saying is that you start with the high priority groups for primary series, and then also you continue with the boosters for the high priority groups. And in terms of the other age groups, we know that the risk of severe disease is lower. So that's why in protecting healthcare workers, which is the important ones being on the first line, and then elderly, immunocompromised, people with comorbidities and pregnant women are those that they have a higher risk of having to go to the hospital because they got COVID, or maybe even the risk of death. I don't know, Benjamin, if you would like to add anything.
Okay.
No, I think main point is I think we have to start moving on. You know, we always talk. I mean, and even Jimmy, you said like first, you know, we had single dose vaccines, and now they've turned into 2-dose vaccines, right? But now actually we think that the normal vaccine are now already 3-dose vaccines. You know, we call them boosters, but in the end there is like 3 doses, and you know, who knows if they turn into 4 doses next year, and we have to continue with this. So I think that our thinking about how to protect the populations and how often we need to vaccinate people has just evolved over time, because we don't know how quick some of this immunity is waning. And so it's still, I think, an important learning process.
Got you. I think we have time for one more question. I wanna open the floor to the audience here. I see a lot of in-country folks whose names I recognize, people like Bernadette, Tato, Martha. Do you have a question for the panelists? And you can put your question in the chat box or unmute yourself and ask your question.
In the meantime, I would love to ask a question. This is Jen.
Go ahead, Jen.
Thinking back, Benjamin, to your point about campaigns being pretty effective, but they are quite expensive, but can make uptake, you know, increase uptake of the vaccine. how should countries be thinking through these costs when they're forecasting demand? So as they're planning and forecasting, how can we consider the additional kind of demand, driving demand costs and what that looks like in terms of what products they should be prioritizing?
No, it's a good question. I think really the idea, what Alba also said, and that's part of the demand planning process when we started it, is to really have a programmatic view on what countries want to achieve. And then, I think there is quite a bit of funding available, at least for the AMC and especially for the 34 prior, concerted support countries. But the problem is funding is very fragmented. And that makes it difficult. So for the EPI teams, they have to write many applications, and we're trying to reduce. That's my other hat. I'm talking now my financing hat on. I've got this demand planning and financing. So I tell you what we've done is kind of simplify, and we have been able to provide funding very quickly to countries that have financial bottlenecks. Sometimes being able to provide funding within a few days. So. And I see here some colleague from Burkina Faso is online. So Burkina Faso had Pfizer vaccines that were about to expire, and then we had a call with the EPI team, and then we're able to provide funding very quickly within 2 or 3 days to extend a nationwide campaign. So we have some tools now available where we can close funding gaps quickly. Also, the point is sometimes the Gavi funding is inadequate, and then WHO and UNICEF will provide additional funds. UNICEF has provided last year even to some $600 million of funding to the country level, and WHO as well, and it's big numbers if you think about it. So if countries, the one thing countries should really focus on is getting one budget in place where they outline, it can be even roughly, what funding do they need until the end of the year to achieve their December coverage milestones. If they need 2 more nationwide campaigns, they should be able to cost this even roughly. If they need to expand the number of fixed sites, they should be able to budget this roughly. And we're asking really all the countries now to come up with their one budget, and then we're asking all the donors to program against this one budget, and really making sure that the country has a clear view on the cost funding they need, and people slot against it instead of asking every time, give me a proposal for this or for this, and it's all piecemeal. So that's what we're trying to do. It's still probably going to be a little bit fragmented, but we are trying to get some of this fragmentation out. There is a lot of funding available. If we ever find funding gaps, we're really trying to close them, and donors are really willing and supportive to close them. So flag them, talk to your WHO, UNICEF, Gavi country focal points about this. Leverage the World Bank funding. Talk to your bilateral donors that are also providing quite a bit of funding. So I'm happy to actually have a whole discussion on funding. Maybe here in this community again, maybe we can come back to this and unwrap this a bit more.
We'll definitely take that on board, Benjamin. Let me take this opportunity to thank our panelists for making time and effort in putting together some of the most insightful presentations I've had to date on the work that they're doing. Let me hand over now to my colleague, Stacy, to share with us some of the work that she's doing with PriorityVax. Thanks again to our panelists.
Thanks so much, Ku. I am going to very quickly just introduce something that I think is a tool that has significant relevance to today's discussion. The PriorityVax tool was developed in 2015. It's an online, highly flexible tool that has been designed to address a wide range of vaccine selection, introduction, and programming decisions. But looking at a lot of the discussions today, it's particularly well suited to address some of the needs and the uncertainty, the tailored needs, and the adaptability that I think really needs to be part of this ongoing decision-making process that so many countries and programs are grappling with as they think about the next phase of COVID vaccine introduction. If I could get the next slide. And as I said, it's a highly flexible tool. It is a decision support tool that can address a range of challenges, but I wanted to just quickly show you here an example of a decision matrix that is really representative of what we've been discussing here today. And it's a way to capture, to codify, and really score the wide array of COVID vaccine products and weigh those and score them against the individual characteristics that are informing and that key criteria that's informing your individual programs and your selection decisions. It essentially allows you to match products to your vaccination strategies and the capacity that you have. While I don't have time to demonstrate how the tool works, what I can show you here, and if you just look on the slide here, you can see that it provides you an opportunity to put in, and this is just a small captured list of the kinds of vaccines that are available, but anything that may be on offer to your program can be entered in. And then against that, you can enter the wide range of different considerations that you may have within your program. And you can make decisions about what are the key characteristics. You can weight them to decide what pieces of that decision-making process and those characteristics of your decision-making process, in fact, are more important, need to be considered more, whether that's cost, whether it's the number of doses that may be available, whether there are issues around the cold chain. So it allows this opportunity to entirely sort of customize that decision-making process for you. I've included below at the bottom of the slide a link to a resource page where you can learn more about this, where you can request an opportunity to be able to log in to the platform, to be able to use the tool, and there's contact information if you wish to learn more. So I've really enjoyed the discussion today, appreciate the opportunity to share this with you. Thanks so much, and over to you, Jen.
Thanks, Stacey. Well, just to wrap up, I know we've got 1 minute. I just want to thank all the panelists, Benjamin, Alba, Immaculate, Jimmy, and Stacey, thanks for your notes. This was a fantastic discussion. I know that we had some questions pop in that, Benjamin, thank you for getting those responses out quickly. We will have all of the responses to all the questions that came through also available in our wrap up that will come out soon, and then available on Boost Community. So more to come on that. We will follow up there. Benjamin, we would love to take you up on your offer to do another session focused on funding. I think it's a question that we get a lot from Boost Community members in country. And so we'll talk more and follow up with you. In addition, I know if folks are really interested in learning more about PriorityVax, which is a free to access tool, we'll also throw a link that Stacey put up on that slide in the chat right now. We'd also be willing to kind of do a smaller workshop with some folks if they wanted to walk through how to use that tool. So with that, yes, please take our post-session survey. Please join the COVID-19 Listening and Learning Series learning group within boostcommunity.org. And you can also join us on Telegram through the link that we have up on the slide. But again, we'll throw these links also into the chat. Our next upcoming live engagements and opportunities, gosh, we have so many coming up. April 25th, Sabins Gold Medal. April 27th, the 20-year road to ending cervical cancer in China. And in May 6th, COVID-19 recovery for routine immunization program fellowship starts. We just released the application for this fellowship, I believe yesterday. So please do apply to join us. Very excited again for the panel that we had today. Thanks to everyone who joined us and especially to our panelists. We look forward to continuing the conversation soon. Thanks everyone. Have a great day.